Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast. And welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
Grandfather Appreciation Thread. Chinese bro here. I have a story about my grandfather during the Japanese occupation of China. I'm not green texting because I want to give as much detail as my grandfather gave me. My grandfather was a teenager that worked in his father's bakery and convenience store when the Japanese invaded and successfully took over his village. Fortunately for him, these weren't the barbaric Nanking Japs as we all know, but nice soldiers that allegedly gave out candy and toys for the kids after successfully taking over. However, these were still the oppressors that interrupted the way of life for many. My grandfather escaped to the countryside with his family, surviving off unripe fruit and morsels of bread, while a few of his male neighbors and friends became resistance fighters against the Japanese occupants in his town. By war's end, many of the people he knew were long gone, whether they died in combat, of hunger, or were simply executed. He recalls that his shop was ransacked of all things and was in an absolute mess. Sorry if it's not a super/K/story where my grandpa goes full operator, but I feel it is necessary to pass on his story.
My Gramps died when I was 5, but I still hear stories of him. Most of them involve a motorcycle and some violence. During the war, Gramps was a dispatch runner in the Hungarian army in World War II. He rode a motorbike and carried messages between the various units. You can imagine, it wasn't exactly the safest job on the Eastern Front in 1944. He even got shot in the leg once, but he rode on. Later in 1949, he got into an argument with a drunk policeman when he wanted to cross a railway crossing with his motorcycle when this drunk cop made the mistake of trying to mess with him. After a brief exchange of profanities, said policeman tried to attack him with a bayonet. Mind you, it's 1949 with lots of fucking communism. Cops were carrying army-issue bolt-action rifles with bayonets back then. Gramps reacted by punching him in the jaw, sending him to the ground. And he got away with it. After all, it was the idiot cop who was drunk while on duty. And then there was 1956. So in 1956, there was this revolution which you may or may not have heard about. Gramps and his little family lived in southwestern Hungary at the time, far away from the actual events. The locals established a kind of a revolutionary committee, though, and elected Gramps and some other guy as representatives. Shortly after, Gramps had, guess what? Another motorbike accident. He almost died in the accident, but the accident happened to save his life. The revolution was surpassed, there was a period of severe repercussions, and the other guy I mentioned was hanged for treason. But Gramps was in hospital, completely plastered up with half of his bones broken, so they couldn't do much with him. He lay there for about half a year, and the authorities basically forgot about him. My old man told me that Gramps had a collection of photos he took during the war, and they are somewhere in the attic at Grandma's house. If I ever find them, I'll post them.
My great-grandfather served as an infantryman in the U.S. Army escorting tank destroyers. He joined up at age 33. They barely took him because of his age. The Army must have been pretty desperate. After D-Day and went straight into France after basic training. Apparently there was a point when his unit was cut off from being resupplied, and a French farmer volunteered a cow to be slaughtered to feed the American soldiers. Since my Gramps was a North Carolinian farmer, he was asked to butcher the cow so everyone could eat. Someone said it was a general who asked him to do it, which would be either Patton or Marshall based on him being in a tank destroyer battalion. I wonder if that bit is family fluff. But hey, at least he was badass enough to butcher a cow and feed a bunch of teenagers and early 20s baby faces the freshest beef they would ever have. He went on to fight in the Battle of the Bulge and pushed all the way through to Berlin. One of his dreams was to return to Germany to see the beautiful countryside, but sadly he died of a heart attack before he could ever make it back to Europe. Sadly, he didn't come home with either his rifle or pistol. Through his son-in-law, I've been willed his old hunting shotgun, and when he died I was given his binoculars from the war. One of the 2 bits still works.
Grandpa on Mom's side got out of draft for Vietnam. Flatfoot. Great uncle gets drafted. One of the first guys to train stateside with M16. Big guy gets a big pig. Chinese New Year. Army sets up to ambush Viet Cong. Uncle's squad is set up to catch any runners from the camp from the river. Set up M60 on log on Overwatch Cliff. Several minutes of AK and M16 fire, the entire camp is on fire. Uncle makes fun of how the fireworks got set off by an M203. River is full of Viet Cong wading through it trying to get away. M60 gives no shits. 34 confirmed kills later. Jams or runs out of ammo, he can't remember what happened next. Shit Chinese frag grenade finds its way to the top of the hill, goes off, kills no one but rips my uncle's face and left eye to shreds. He gets up screaming, took 4 AK rounds to the chest, comes home with a glass eye and bum right arm. In this town of 400 people, close friends and neighbors, apparently people still hated him for whatever the GI did during Vietnam. Now whenever I come over to help him on his farm, a day can't go by where he doesn't show me the pictures of these peppers that look like dicks he found in Vietnam, and he keeps making the joke of falling down and popping his glass eye out and walking around like nothing happened. I ask him about if it's hygienic. He tells me some dirt and tap water hasn't killed him yet.
From the perspective of my grandfather, 1950. Broke arm from motorcycle accident. Fails draft for Army. Okay, whatever. 1951. All my buddies were shipped off to Korea, and I was left here. Hell, I want to get in on some of this action. Go to draft physical. Nurse fails me again, despite my pestering. Talk to old buddy, who is now a high-ranking military officer. Says he can schedule me another draft physical and kind of grease the gears to get him in the Army. Go to draft physical, nurse from hell again. Here we go again. .jpg. Nurse fails me again. Talk to my buddy who was waiting. Tells a nurse to ignore my former broken arm and let me in. Nope. .avi. Give me a permanent exemption from the draft. Still pissed. Have to leave. Army buddy said that permanent exemptions aren't given out too often, and that I should just take it. Fine. Guess I will go farm and get drunk for the next 20 years. Poor Grandpa. All he wanted to do was go shoot commies with his buddies.
My grandpa was a Marine in Korea, but I don't think he saw any combat. When he got out, he went to school and got a job as an aeronautical engineer at Lockheed. He wasn't involved with the SR-71, but did work on Corona spy satellites and the guidance systems for early ICBMs. One night, he and 2 engineer buddies had a deadline the next day and still needed to test the internal star map in the guidance system of a MIRV, multiple independently targetable re-entry vehicle. I guess there was too much light pollution near the Sunnyvale offices, so they had to go off-site. They threw the fucker in the back of Granddad's family sedan and drove out to a field. They were just getting underway when the local police department pulled up and asked what they were doing with a car full of strange electronics. Since the material was so highly classified, they couldn't explain to the cop what they were doing or even let him see it, as one of his buddies was trying to come up with a cover. Grandpa slammed the trunk closed and flung the keys past the tree line into the darkness. The cop about shit himself trying to draw and cuffed all of them. When they got to the station, they called their department head and got him to come down. Local police department told him to fuck off, so a few more calls were made. An hour later, a couple of guys in suits showed up, and suddenly Grandpa and his buddies were free to go.
Great-grandfather was sent to Siberia with his mother, who died on the train ride there in the 1910s. Came back home to his village along the Volga River, eventually, and was treated like shit, and beaten. So he took his sister, and they traveled across Russia, while it was still ripe with civil war, when he was only 14 years old. He had to shave his sister's head so that the soldiers wouldn't find out she was a girl if they were caught. My grandfather fought in the Canadian Army during the Second World War. I don't know what he did specifically because most of the people left alive on that side of the family are not interested in it. But apparently, he came back with PTSD and beat my grandmother and ended up an alcoholic. He eventually took his own life. My great-uncle fought in the Canadian Army as well. He was in Caen, among other places in that theater. He operated a PIAT and later a Bren LMG. My mom once told me that he shot up Germans with the machine gun because they were trying to stop the Canadians from loading civilians on a train to get them to safety.
Great-grandpa was considerably aged when I was born, 83, and so what time we did spend was mostly spent doing stuff like fishing, skiing, hunting and stuff. He did teach me wood carving, though. From what I can tell from his son and daughters, the time he spent in World War I was unpleasant, and made worse by the heavy restrictions put on Germany after the war. Pretty much everyone in my family sneers when they hear about the Treaty of Versailles. Grandma called it the German humiliation that had to be signed. Grandpa was a Kripo arson investigator, and great-grandpa worked in the forestry service both in southern Germany not far from the home in Lorach. Both were bored and were in the party, they said, for political reasons. It was hard to work for the state and not be a member. Grandpa was a police officer, so he had his dealings with people who would try to commit robbery and the like during blackouts. He would also go to Stuttgart and work there for several months a year to be on rotation. He was there during the firebombing, which was pretty horrific. Kind of generic, really. Also, my family hates communists.
I've posted this story before in full, but basically, great-uncle mowed down 41 Japanese sailors with a .30 cal Browning in the Pacific during World War II. My great-grandpa hopped trains during the Depression looking for work so he could feed his family. He won a state boxing championship in the 1920s and used the money to keep a roof over his family's head and food on the table. He never had the chance to go to school, Montana in early 1900s LOL. He taught himself everything he knew. He'd order manuals and technical books from catalogs and have them delivered, then would literally learn them in a few days or weeks. Locksmithing, auto mechanics, welding, circuits, etc. Hunting and fishing on his own, of course. Eventually, he went to school and graduated with an engineering degree in the 1940s. My grandpa was in the Navy and then became a physicist. My grandma speaks 4 or 5 languages and was a nurse in her younger days. Somehow, most of my family became very successful in one generation. Today, my grandparents live pretty happily in a nice condo in California. All the money they have, they earned themselves. My great-grandfather's cousin on the other side killed 3 Japanese soldiers and 2 Germans during World War II. You will never be a manly man war hero, then go home and start a successful new life. You realize that their generation did it all for our generation.
Be great-great-granddad. Be from a poor family with a drunk for a father and 5 brothers and 6 sisters. Leave home and go to fight in the Great War. At 14 in the beginning of 1918, be aircraft mechanic, war ends, stay in the military. December 8, 1941, round 2, be a fighter pilot P-64, 1943, escorting B-17 bombers from England over France. Out of nowhere, flak and lots of it. No one went down, but some of the bombers looked like Swiss cheese. Bombs dropped. Time to head home. Be just before the French coast, fucking Luftwaffe. Dogfight. Get 2 kills before being shot down just off the coast. Oh shit. Crash in the water. Try to get out, but the canopy won't budge. Shit. Pull 1911 and put 4 rounds into it to bust out of there. Get out and swim to the beach. Escape and evade time, bitches. Start heading south towards Spain. Steal food and shit from farmhouses and shit. Be moving through some woods at night. Hear rustling and footsteps. It's a patrol. Hide. The patrol comes to a halt just a few yards away. Wait a fucking minute, the Germans don't have Stens. Shit, it's the fucking French underground. Make contact with them. Get held at gunpoint and disarmed. They take me to a distant house where someone speaks English. Get interrogated by them until they believe that I really am a downed American pilot. They hook me up with somebody to get me out of the country. 2 weeks later, I walk across the Spanish border. Get back to England, go back to escorting bombers, war ends, move back to the Ridges, Tennessee, have a family and die.
I don't care if this goes unnoticed, I need to get this off me. I just found out that my great-grandfather, PIC-related, died in August. He was a veteran from the siege of Leningrad and worked for the KGB for most of his life. Here's the only story I remember him telling me. Be me, probably 19. Leningrad, sometime in 1943. Middle of the night. Preparing for a charge across the Neva River to break the German encirclement. If the starved to half-death teenagers can even make it across the river, be positioned next to a machine gun position. Some guy operating the Degtyaryov, peppering the other bank to prepare for charge. Can't hear shit because of all the combined gunfire between the two lines. Gunner is reloading. And reloading. And reloading. Look at him. Kid's bent over backwards in his nest, dead. Can't even see his face. Sergeant is yelling in his own hole. Why is the gun silent? Shit. No other machine gunner around. Hop into the nest, don't even know how to use this thing. Hope the last guy managed to reload before dying. Squeeze trigger. The thing fires. Proceed to fire at anything visible when I'm not ducking under the piece of cover. I think he got relieved by another gunner with more ammo for the gun later on. Can't remember. Later that night, getting close to morning, we're charging the next bank, cramming dozens of people into tiny boats and makeshift rafts, start going across under covering fire. Germans have caught on, start shelling us with mortars and probably artillery too. Ordered to cross the river. Can't stop now. Get on a raft with maybe 10 other guys. Start crossing. Shells hitting all around in the river. Probably half the rafts have gone down. Bodies everywhere. Almost at the shore, just a few more meters. Shell goes off right behind the raft. Whole thing flips. End up making it to the other side. More guys are making it over too. More reinforcements. Win war. I have not seen him for over 9 years. And now he too is gone.
Be my grandfather. Get lung cancer from Agent Orange. The fact that you smoked filterless Camels until the day you died, and worked in Kentucky coal mines for most of your childhood. Have 7 confirmed kills in Nam. Make a career in breeding killer Dobermans and selling them to police agencies all across the planet. Live in New York and actively break every firearm law just 'cause you got bored. Now be me, 10 years old. Have Redditor father who adamantly refuses to teach me how to shoot. Me and my dad got into an argument over letting me shoot. Argument happens in front of Grandpa in his house. Grandpa ain't having none of that shit. Goes in his closet and gets a single shot bolt action Marlin 22 and a few empty beer cans. Anon, get your shit. We're going in the backyard. Dad is having a spur gout, but I'm just happy I'm gonna shoot something. Grandpa lives upstate and has a few acres, so we hide in the furthest part so Dad won't find us. Blow away some Heineken. My grandpa and I are smiling from ear to ear. Dad finally finds us and tells us how Grandpa put his kid in danger and he's gonna call the cops. Grandpa slaps my dad and goes, "I taught you how to shoot when you were half his age. You should be embarrassed I'm doing this and not his own father." We leave, and Dad is silent the rest of the way home. So that's the story of the most manliest man I've ever known, and my first time shooting. Grandpa even gave me the brass from the first round I've ever fired, and I still have it to this day. When he died, he also left me all of his guns, most of which were unregistered handguns. I live in New York, and non-legal semi-auto rifles. R.I.P. this legend.
Almost everything I learn about my family comes from my dad. Recently, while we were in the Target parking lot waiting for my mother and sister to get out, he told me a story about my great-grandfather. Anon, have I ever told you about the story about your great-grandfather and the coyote? Nope. Seriously? I thought I told you this. He gets straight into it. From there. Be the 1930s. Great Depression. Mississippi times aren't exactly easy, obviously, nor are they clean. If my great-great-grandmother asked my great-great-grandfather and my great-grandfather if they wanted chicken for dinner, and she got a yes, she'd be out back cutting a chicken's head off 5 minutes later. One day she tells them, that the neighbor's dog had been coming over and killing her chickens. Not even eating them, just maiming them. So my great-great-grandfather and great-grandfather get in their truck and drive over to the neighbor's house to confront him. When they get there, the neighbor is sitting on his porch, and the coyote is sitting on the steps below. The dog was actually an old coyote. They get out of the truck and walk about 15 feet away from the porch. My great-great-grandfather says, "Sir, are you aware that your beast has been killing my wife's chickens?" The neighbor looks down at the coyote, then back at them and says, "It's not mine." Before my great-great-grandfather can get another word out, my great-grandfather pulls out a revolver and shoots the coyote in the head. My great-great-grandfather's face when about 15 seconds go past, and my great-grandfather drops a one-liner on the neighbor. "I guess you won't miss him then." He does a 180 and gets back in the truck. The ride back was dead silent.
I can't keep this story to myself anymore. Every time I think about it, makes me want to cry. 8 years old at the time. My grandfather had passed away. Didn't do much with him. Knew he was in the military, and he really liked tanks. 2 years later, we have to clean out his storage because he was pretty much a hoarder, going through everything. There is a white box in the very back, no markings whatsoever on it. Big metal locks and latches. Dad shrugs and takes it home. Later on, he managed to break it open and get in. Loads of electronics inside, some paperwork with it. It was a targeting system to one of the early M1 Abrams, an entire fucking targeting system. Father freaks out. Not too sure what exactly it was at the time. Father takes it out to the desert that weekend and destroys it, several years later. Had forgotten all about it. Grandmother's health has declined, so we had to move her in with us. Have to watch her, talking to her one day while rearranging her room for her. She mentions my grandfather. Find out he helped develop the Abrams and did extensive testing on it. Oh no. Oh no. Finally realized the extent of what my father did 10 years ago. He destroyed the targeting system for the Abrams. A targeting system. He destroyed part of my grandfather's legacy because the government is going to get us. It's been haunting me ever since my grandmother mentioned it last year. I just can't get it out of my head. I don't want these feels. I don't want this burden, /K/.
He showed me newspaper clippings of escapees. There was always a handful per year. He would tell me that to a T, the prison breaks always coincided with rainy weather. Most escapees would flee to the surrounding neighborhoods. They would try to hide in people's garages and basements, under their porches, waiting for the rain to pass. Sometimes the men would break into the houses. Sometimes the men would do unspeakable things to people residing in those houses. We lived only about 8 miles from Rönnberg, and on rainy days my grandpa would remind me of this. He showed me newspaper clippings of escapees. There was always a handful per year. He would tell me that to a T, the prison breaks always coincided with rainy weather. Most escapees would flee to the surrounding neighborhoods. They would try to hide in people's garages and basements, under their porches, waiting for the rain to pass. Sometimes the men would break into the houses. Sometimes the men would do unspeakable things to people residing in those houses. We lived only about 8 miles from Rönnberg, and on rainy days my grandpa would remind me of this. My grandpa would tell me that on rainy days it was best to just stay in my room, to lock my door, to put some music on low, grab a comic book and get my head somewhere else. He even taught me how to turn my closet into a fortress of solitude. We threw a blanket and a couple of pillows in there. I had a few posters of superheroes on the closet wall. I kept a box of comic books and baseball cards in one corner, and a metallic footlocker filled with junk food and cassette tapes in the other. My grandpa would encourage me to get in the closet when it rained, especially when it stormed. I would sit in there listening to my Walkman. I would finger through comic books. I would bundle myself up against the pillows and drift to sleep. I felt safe in my closet, and I enjoyed the hours that I would spend in there on rainy days. He would tell me that most of the time during escapes, The convicts would usually only hurt people they happened to come across. If they broke into a home to avoid police, and there was a family sitting around the TV in the living room, they would strike. He would tell me that if a Red Vark prisoner escaped, and if they came to our neighborhood, and if they broke into our house, that as long as I stayed in my closet, I'd be okay. It would be possible for a convict to find me and hurt me, but as long as I stayed in my closet fort, I would be as safe as anyone in town. I would remind myself of this on rainy days. I would sit in my closet and think about it, and it would make me feel safe. My grandpa disappeared one June. I lived with him alone. My parents had died years earlier. My grandpa disappeared, and I was afraid to call the police. I knew if something happened to my grandpa, the police would take me away and force me to live in a home. I didn't want to live in a home. I had a home. I kept his disappearance to myself for over a week. I would walk myself to school. I knew where Grandpa kept emergency cash, and so I would take a little here and there to the corner bodega and buy some milk and sandwich meats. One day, about 8 days after his disappearance, they let us out of school early. Storm of the century, they said. Thunder and lightning and heavy rain all night. The rain was so heavy that night, the local streets flooded over. On the walk home from school, the water was up to my ankles. By 9 o'clock, the water was coming up to people's knees. I got home, climbed into my little hiding space, and covered myself in a blanket. Thunder clapped outside. I was very afraid. The storm itself unsettled me, but thinking about Red Vark and how easy it would be to escape during a storm like this terrified me. We lost power after a little while. I sat in the closet in darkness. I turned to my Walkman for solace. After a few hours, the music started to stutter. After a few more minutes, it stopped altogether. Batteries, dead as doornails. I continued to sit in silence. The power hadn't come back on yet. The darkness and silence enveloped me. Then the silence was broken by a scratching noise some distance away. I ignored it at first, but it grew louder and more insistent. Finally, I reluctantly left the safety of my fort. In the upstairs hallway, I stopped and listened. The noise was clearly coming from downstairs. I descended the stairs, my heart pounding in my chest. I got to the kitchen and stopped to listen again. The noise still sounded as if it were coming from below me. We had no basement, so the fact that the noises were coming from beneath me was unsettling. There were more noises now too, not just the scraping. I thought I heard moaning. I crouched low to the floor, listening. The noises got louder as I entered the living room, louder still as I entered the main corridor. I stopped on a throw rug at the end of the hallway. The noises were at their loudest here, below me. I pulled the throw rug away and saw a trap door. It must have led to a basement or crawl space. I had no idea it existed. I had no idea there was anything under that rug. I wondered why it was padlocked. I grabbed a ring of old keys that hung on a hook in the mudroom. I tried the keys in the padlock one after another. The fourth key slid into the lock like a base runner sliding into... Something pounded against the bottom of the trap door. Thwap! Thwap! It was followed by muffled voices. Hello, Ebby there. I could barely make out the voices. Thwap! Help us! I understood that. I turned the key and lifted up the trap door. The worst smell I've ever known wafted up and hit me in the chest. I instantly heard women crying and a man's voice sobbing, "Thank God, oh thank God." And then another. "Water, please, we need water." The next few days were a whirlwind. Police, media, and gawkers descended on the house. Our small town in Arizona never saw much excitement. The news of a homegrown serial killer sent an electric jolt through the populace. The media was relentless. The police had a million questions. "Where's your grandfather?" "I don't know." "Did you know what he was doing?" "Did you help him hide his secret?" "No," I'd said. "No, never." "Did you help your grandfather bury the bodies in the backyard?" "No." "You must have helped," they'd said. "No. You must have helped. An old man like that wouldn't be able to dig in the Arizona clay all by himself." And then it hit me. "Rain," I'd said. The policeman looked at me blankly. "What?" He'd wait for it to rain.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel, as more Greentext will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.